Hello and welcome to TechNact. This is a podcast where we have conversations with different people doing research or activism in relation to social movements, gender, sexualities, and digital technologies. My name is Onur.
And my name is Nadia. And today we are joined by Estefania Jimenez, who I also called my best friend since high school. So I think that's really good. She is the director of Design of Textile Fashion unit in Lafayette in Colombia, where we are at the moment. And she also has created a gamer community for women and also men, right? Called Gamer Girl Industries. So welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm very happy to participate in this podcast.
Nice. Okay, let us know how are you doing? What do you do? A little bit about yourself, your work.
Okay, I'm currently the creative director of Lafayette Fashion, as Nadia said. This is a textile company, and I work in the printing department mainly. I also do trend forecast because it's the source of all the creative decisions we take. And I lead this department. It's called the Next Lab, a department that is only focused in consumer behavior, also in how the cities and people are going to behave in the future, how we can develop better materials, better colors, better silhouettes, and of course prints for this future consumer. This is mainly what I do. I also have this new project. It's called Gamer Girl Industries. This is a project I've been thinking for a long time. I'm a gamer, also Nadia, and this is very exciting for me because I think women have different narratives about gaming, and the main narratives in media and also what we want to read in video games is very mediated to men, point of view. And this is important because I think a lot of girls play but have to adapt their way of playing, their way of enjoying video games to this male gaze, I think. So I created this from a very feminine point of view, an extra feminine point of view, because I want to highlight that we can be both feminine and both gamers, because I don't think that's something you see a lot in the industry.
Thank you. Very nice.
Very interesting.
Going for maybe the fashion side first, we would like to ask you, what can you tell us from the fashion perspective, or like the work that you do, about gender?
Well, I think this is very interesting and very long conversation. But I think what is important about fashion and gender is a social conversation. Gender in fashion is about social behavior. So in some parts of the world, the gender is very important for fashion and the offering of clothing, but in other countries, maybe the ones that are more ahead in the construction of gender is not as important. And I think that is very valuable because you can see different perspectives about garments and style. It's very mediated about what people think in the region that you're at. So I think, for example, in gender, now I see a lot of trends about non-gender, even brands about non-gender as their main focus. So you can have garments that can be used in very different sizes, very different types of people, not just women or men, but about body types mainly. And I think this is something that in Colombia we are seeing a little bit. There are brands now that are designing these clothes that are that are um, that are think about the person, about their body, and not about the gender. So more about the lifestyle, or maybe what parts of the body they want to enhance, but not about if this female or male. I think that is important. And also they have these values about femininity translated to something that mainly is for men. And for example, ruffles, sequins, lace, that are materials that are for women in the most of the countries, most regions, but now they're used also in these male clothing in design. So I think this is a conversation that is very ahead in Europe. For example, you can see a lot of brands that are working on that. Latin America is not as far as does not have that fast forward thinking that the Europe has. But I think there's a little bit of efforts here, and I hope it grows. I think it's very important. I think masculinity in fashion is very, very toxic. In order of course, in all the spectrum it is, but it has deprived men to show themselves as beauty creatures. I think we all have apparently the same freedom to choose things that represent us in fashion, but I think men really don't have that freedom because of all the social things that define what is being to be masculine and to be a real man. And in Latin America, that is very important for the society. I think we haven't passed that point yet. So I think that is important about gender specifically. Also in women, that you can have, I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of trends for women too. For example, here in Colombia, because of the beauty standards we have, there's a lot of garments and trends in fashion that are well seen. Because it makes the woman look sexy, no? And that's very important here, very, very important. But I think the pandemic showed or view with another light the fact that we need to be comfortable, and people does not feel the need to be sexy through this media, through Zoom, through video meetings. So a lot of brands that have a very sexy DNA in their photos, in their tops, in their bottoms, in every design choice they used to make, now use this very important criteria of comfort in their campaigns. And now they say women can also be comfortable, like if that wasn't something that we needed before. But I think this showed some light, and for example, lingerie, swimsuits brands that use this power about sex in women are now branding all about loungewear and be comfortable in your own skin. And I think it's very funny because, for example, I put comfort first, but that's not the main interest for women in this region. Here, sexy and being beautiful is more important than being comfortable. And I think that's something about gender, because to men that's not a requirement.
But do you think that it might, I remember you telling me, like maybe many years ago, but how, so like men used to be the ones that showed beauty through makeup, through garnets, through actually you were telling me that they were the first ones using high heels and this kinds of things. So why do you think there is this shift? At what point in time there was this shift from men being the beauty, or like wanted to be seen as a beautiful creature, like you said, and then so like moving from that to men being super sober and plain, and nothing with nothing to do with colors or anything.
This is very sad. I think the point of no return for men's fashion was the Industrial Revolution. This because garments and clothes were something made from people locally and not in a mass scale, right? And talking about, for example, kings, queens, all these courtesans and all these people from the high society, they had these tailors, they tailor-made their clothes, and in these social gatherings, they had the chance to distinguish themselves not only from the people that were poor, but of course between countries. This is because, for example, in the Middle Age, you had the King of Spain, the King of France, the King of England, and all of them had different aesthetics in their courts. And this was a way to show their political and religious interests. So, for example, the court in Spain is the most religious of them all. And the court in France were the ones that were more exuberant, and they showed their luxury. For the Spanish people, that was not even on the table, because that was against their beliefs, and they were more like muted. The Spain court is very famous for having black clothes, for example, but black is also a very hard color to achieve in that time. And they were able to do that because they have conquered Mexico and Colombia, and from here they gathered that black, their black, no sé si lo insumo.
The black product,
raw material
from
Latin America to make that black color. That's why the Spain court had these very black attires, but black was very hard to achieve, even white. So you have a lot of colors that are made from natural materials, but black was out of the question. So they showed their luxury to black. And they also said that they want to be so fancy because that was against God. Okay. And this is important because this is the way, like peacocks, they came to the court, they came to the social spaces, and they shared the way they dressed. If politically Spain was dominating France and England, the other courts start to inspire their attires in the dominant one. So, of course, they married each other and everything, and the styles passes to court, right? Fashion has two main functionalities. The first one is to blend. So, if I am part of this court, I want to blend with them. And so I understand what are their styles, and I try to do the ones for me the same way,
to
copy them, to blend with them. But it also has the function to stand out. They wanted to blend because they want to belong, to be part of the court. But they want to be different from the people that are poor. And it's a cycle that is ongoing. In that time, that wasn't called actually fashion. You can say that was, for example, like history of clothing, maybe not necessarily fashion. Fashion is this machine that goes on changing, right? And that started to go maybe in the Marie Antoinette ages, Louis XIV, and they make this machine of fashion a business, and they create this business for France that didn't have any resources, that didn't have mines, they weren't sailors, so they chose that the things that they were going to be strong were the ones in the soft power, for example cuisine, for example fashion, for example the creative spaces for mirrors, cafes, even hairdressers, all these that we see France that is very strong of, they build that in that time, and they create a business of it. If it wasn't a business, everyone could wear whatever they want, but since there is money for the country, for the people, for the ateliers and everything, this started to change very quickly, because if I have the week of this week, and it doesn't matter if I have it the next week, I won't buy a new one. But if the system starts to change very fast, I will need to buy a new one. And that is what started an ongoing business. The Industrial Revolution, as I said before, is the moment in which the men's are took out from this system, because it's easier for them to have a more toned down attire. And this is also because all that is luxurious and reminds you of royalty is como digo, mal visto.
It's seen as it's not
a good thing. It's not a good thing to be related to royalty, and royalty are the ones that are fashionable. So these people, all the French Revolution, start to make this idea that being practical, that being not excessive with the things that you wear is better in a moral way. So when the Industrial Revolution starts, that is really, really deep in people. So and in men, they start to be part of the production system. The clothes are no longer tailor-made for a local person, and start to be something mass-produced. So it's easier to build a standard, and all men that has to work at the same hour in a factory dress equal, and women stayed in the house. That's why fashion explodes in women's wardrobes and not in men's, because they needed men to be focused on productivity and women to be focused on buying things. That is mainly Victorian. It's like fill your house with everything a machine can make, and maybe before you couldn't buy those things because having a good china is very expensive, but having a china that looks almost like the real one but made for a machine is cheaper. So these housewives fill their houses with everything the Industrial Revolution could make. And that also includes clothes. Men, they weren't targets for this strategy. And that's why we see the explosions of silhouettes, of types of garments, because to that point, even underwear didn't exist. That specializes after the Industrial Revolution. And after that, even in the 20th century, started all the sizes, and they they build boxes to put people in different sizes. But before that, you have to be measured to make clothes. So that's important because finally men were put out. We're taking that system because they have to be focused on productivity, and because aesthetics in men were related to be a lazy king, and all these values that people want to put behind that were related to royalty.
Everything is connected.
That was super complex. Did I?
No, it's
that was clear.
Yeah, it was clear.
It was. Actually, you bring us in a very like amazing journey of the history of fashion, and and actually in this way we can see how like the meanings of aesthetics change, how the colors can switch their meanings or represent certain status symbols and different meanings throughout centuries, and how it is so much related to politics, to class, to different positions in society. So that's very interesting. Also how colonial relations work in terms of even colors, and how the colors as raw materials, for example, will be more valuable and used as a status symbol, who is based on other people's, exploitation. So in that regard, I think that's very interesting to hear about all these things. And from there, maybe we can move to, because you earlier said masculinity in fashion is very toxic, and that's very obviously an important issue. Like when we look at kind of the history of the fashion industry, obviously we have seen how binary gender regime has been regulating this industry, the male domination, and then reproducing this heteropatriarchal structure over and over. So here, in relation to this, I want to ask you then how, I mean, you already talked about this, but I want to hear more, like how do you think women are represented in the fashion industry? And especially if we connect this to now in a very digitalized understanding of fashion, that we see not only like the fashion, for example, catalogs in magazines, but we have the internet, and the fashion is much more visible. And how do you see then this representation these days in compared to, or thinking of design or modeling, or even using the camera angles, etc.?
Okay. Well, I think very interesting things are happening to the way people see women and women see themselves in fashion, mainly because social media has like two sides, one that for me is very positive and the other one not so much. The first one allows people to be seen without an intermediary, someone in the middle, right? This before, if you wanted to be seen in an ad or in television or something, there was always someone who saw you and said, no, you're not TV material, you're not photo material, you're not too ugly, you don't have the standards. But social media allows us to be seen without that. Of course, we can edit the way we put ourselves out, but there's no more people in between telling you what you can or you can't do to be seen. That's important because you have very different aesthetics, very different types of beauty out, and you can see them without that restriction, I think. On the other hand, I think what is bad about social media is that it also creates another standard. So Nadia said before that my boyfriend is a photographer, and we talk a lot about this because when we see models and we are searching for some types of model for some projects, we see the same face. And I'm not kidding you. This is the same face. It's like they borrow the eye shape, the eyebrows, the lips, is, for me, is very scary. Because you see people that are very look-alike. I have a friend that says that this is the Kardashian effect, maybe, that has the all the faces or the are the same, the lips are the same, the nose are the same, the tan, the hair color is like, is, for me, I think that it's a formula. And even with these other persons that are showing some other types of beauty, this is the dominant one. And a lot of people feel really pressured to fit that mold. Here in Colombia, we have, of course, our own mold. It's kind of a Kardashian, more Latin American, I think. I think that is because there are regions that have a history with narco fashion that Nadia asked me for too. Narco fashion is an aesthetic of people that were involved with narco traffic, with drug deals, and well, this country is very well known for that. But unfortunately, but I think what happens when you have these two things, the things that happen in social media and narco fashion as your main ground, is that you have women all the time thinking about the way they look, and if they are pleasable to the men's eye, because here beauty is something to please a man for women, I think. There are some regions in the country that is a little more evolved, and people are more mind open about changing the way they look, not to have their own exploration in fashion, not only to catch a man or marry with a rich man. I think that that's not the concern of the youth mainly. That is very hard because they mix that standard. Narco fashion is about enhance a women, enhance with plastic surgery, with garments that show a lot of their attributes, and that is very common here. We just see it naturally. It's a part of us, I think. And I think that is also something that we should appreciate more. I don't want to say that I appreciate Narcos, of course not, but there's aesthetic that has developed, and some people enjoyed it a lot. And I think there's something to be respected, that needs to be respected too. This is a country that produces a lot of garments for the region. We have a strong fashion industry. So if we export these garments that make women look more voluptuous and that sells very well, I think that is something to be proud of too. And well, that is some other conversation, but for women, I think we have like these two sides of the same coin. We are able to show ourselves, but we also feel pressure to be like as the ones that fit the mold of the Kardashian mold I told you before. And for this, I think it's very important to be very objective and receive this information in not in an emotional way. I work with fashion and mainly with lingerie and swimwear. So you can imagine the amount of images that I see of semi-naked people all the time. And you see the same type of body, the same type, even in men, the same type of body. And this standard is very strong in campaigns, is very strong in all the media they have. But I think there are brands that are started to change too, that wants to show more natural people, that are showing people with disabilities, that are showing people that has even an exploration in gender. So people that do not relate themselves to a very by gender. So I think that is important, and it's a process, of course, to change to that. But for women, I think there is a pressure, huge pressure in Latin America, huge in Colombia, huge. In Medellin, we have the highest standard in anorexia. In Medellin, kids from 13 to 15 years dying from bulimia and anorexia. Because that is the capital of fashion here.
Yeah. Here, the capital of fashion is Medellin.
So there are a lot of models, male and female, that are from that city, and they feel very pressured. And we're also this cradle of the narco aesthetics. It's like a huge bad combo.
Yeah.
I see. And in compared to then this, let's say, normative situation about how this narco fashion and then woman representation in fashion, can you tell us more about how then gender neutral fashion is visible in Colombia? Do you think it is growing, or is it challenging these norms?
The non-gender fashion? Yes, I think is a statement, clearly, but I also think that youth is very eager to see these new proposals from brands. As I said before, I work in fashion every day. I work with these brands, and I see them more and more disconnected from what people need. And this is why I work so hard in all about consumer behavior, consumer interested. Because if you don't design things that people need and want to solve a situation in their lives, you are just not relevant. I think fashion is design, and design is supposed to be social, because you're designing for people. People are going to use that. You have to have that in mind. So if we understand what kids are saying, what kids are going towards to, we will see that non-gender is very important for them. Even for kids, male kids, they're very interested in aesthetics. I have a cousin that is a centennial, and he's very interested in this movement that they call aesthetics. Is very strange, because aesthetics is everything, but they call this movement aesthetics, and how you can curate your lives to be beautiful. And there are a lot of aesthetics. Is the cottagecore aesthetic, for example, and if it's life that is all surrounded by plants and books, and they even recommend books and films that if you want to go deep in this trend, watch these movies, read these books. And they're very young, people from 13 to 15 years old talking about this, or for example cyberpunk aesthetics, and they call all of this the aesthetics. And I think that is very, very cool, because these kids are more free to pick, for example, colors that their parents wouldn't choose, like pastel colors, like floral prints, and they are not attached to this mindset that florals and that is girly, you can pick that. I think that is mainly because of social media too. Like I said, I think that is very bad things and very good things. I try with my job to search all the means to understand that mindset, because of course I'm not a centennial.
We're millennials.
But I try to understand them, so I go to their for example TikTok. I go for these videos, understand, go super deep, go to their YouTube channels, their favorite YouTube channels. They are out of Facebook, out of Instagram, they do not talk in the same media we talk. And I think that is important to understand what they are thinking, because for that generation, gender is something from the old world. For my generation, is something that we struggle with a lot. And I think that it's going to be very difficult for us, the millennials, to do that jump as fast as the kids. The kids are not thinking about that. It's like, for example, all the millennial parents are thinking about sustainable clothes for their babies. So they chose diapers and little garments, super cute, but sustainable. That wasn't something our parents thought about. They were blind about that. I think that's normal, but it happens the same with gender and the next generation and us. I can say that I don't care about gender because I have studied that a lot, but the majority is going to be very attached to gender in color, in silhouettes. For example, I don't think my boyfriend is going to wear lace ever, seconds ever. And I think that's something that you will see in new generations.
That's super interesting.
It's very interesting. I want to ask, how is the LGBTQI plus visibility in fashion industry? For example, drag is an art which is very, I think, associated so much also with fashion in different countries. How is it in Colombia in that sense?
I think these minorities are always an inspiration, but if we are very, very serious about it, I think that brands and the industry itself use them as a vehicle of inspiration more than acknowledge them. I think there is a difference between pick what they are doing and what are their symbols and their codes to something like a runway, and to choose them as your face of a brand. I think it's very different. And I think we have to work on that, because if not, it's only a mirage. I think if it's only like a way of saying that I support that, but I don't really support them because I'm only using their codes and using their aesthetic. I'm super into drags. I love them. But I think for me, it was also a path to understand what they stand for, what are the codes and the symbols for them that are important, that we have to be respectful for that, because that's a culture too. And it happens the same with fashion covers. So I don't know if you saw it, but there's a kid, Harry Styles, that dress with a dress, and he also uses a lot of feminine garments in red carpets, and people are like, wow, I love him, he's like so innovative. And I think that he can do that because he's in a position of power and he's a white male. And there are a lot of people that have done that before and have not been celebrated the same because I don't know, they're black, they're gay. Harry Styles says he's bisexual, I don't know. But if he said he was gay, maybe because he's a white male in this industry, they would let it pass. And they say, oh, he's like all we wanted. And I think
So
they're
trendy.
so trendy and so fast forward thinking. I think that a lot of people have done that before and have not been celebrated because besides being part of the LGBT plus community, they are black or they are Latino. And I think that's something that has been done before.
Yeah.
So yes, I think in this particular like matter, I think we have to respect a lot where the inspiration comes from, and also be very sensitive, because I can drag myself up because I enjoy that,
Mhm.
For me, it's not a risk. I'm not putting my life at risk for dressing up like drags. And here, for example, being drag, being transsexual is something very dangerous. People die because of dragging themselves up. So I think we have to, as fashion industry, we have to work with that material with care. We have to understand and even say, I'm not going to touch this because it's very sensitive, and I'm not going to use it only because I feel super inspired and these colors are wonderful, because all of that is a manifestation of something deeper.
Mhm.
And that's my opinion about that.
Yes, yeah, I think this is a very, very important point that you raised, that that fashion industry, like these big companies, can use easily queer bodies, non-binary bodies for their marketing purposes. That I have even heard stories that people like queer people wouldn't be even paid for their labor, for example, because of modeling, because these fashion, how do you say, companies say, oh, like we are helping you, your community, by doing this or this kind of thing. So it's very, yes, I think the connection there feels like this is not for like coming from a mutual, how do you say that, respect, but rather than that, it is more like making use of people's identity for their own profit. So that is a common issue, I think. And very, I mean, obviously there are alternatives to it, and there are very nice initiatives, and which I think we will talk later also. But this is, I think, an important problem.
And you see that power relation with everything, with people inspiring or taking inspiration from communities, in indigenous communities, for example, in Mexico, and you see that that unbalanced relationship, because of course the big brand is going to profit about that. They're not going to give back anything from taking that symbols away from the people. And I think it's exactly the same with the LGBTQ and the drag community, that it is so famous for their fashion sense and the way they put innovation to the table. So I think it's something deeper in the fashion industry. It's very hard to understand where it starts copying and where it starts inspiring. And I think that's another conversation, but we have to be very careful if we don't want to hurt any of these communities. And I think it's very important.
No, I agree. Totally.
Thank you. Yeah.
And actually, well, like maybe moving, get back a little bit. You mentioned before how maybe men, maybe in this context in Colombia, or like in general in fashion, using prints or is using floral prints, using different colors is not as well seen. But I was thinking that I have seen men that particularly dress in the Narco fashion, that particularly dress with super like this shirts that are like bright and full of florals and colors and this thing. So what do you think of this type of fashion? Let's say that's this fashion that like goes out of the norm, but still it's sort of like put some sort of I don't know how to explain it, but it's this balance of one thing that is supposed to be powerful and then putting it flowers and stuff.
I think it's a very interesting question, Nadia. Narco fashion is a very interesting topic to go deep in, because narco fashion is a statement of a community that gained money in a very easy but bad way, and started to create their own rules because their money couldn't get them into the high spheres of society. And the high spheres of society have what is called good taste. right? So they were the dominant taste at the time. If people feel that that was elegant, that was it and no more. And since they weren't able to get in that sphere, that social sphere, they had to create what they believe was good taste. And that applies to architecture, and that applies to what women should look like, because of course we have, before Narco fashion, we have our own standards of beauty, and they weren't never like that, right? So Narco fashion is a mix of a lot of sources. For example, they took a lot of inspiration from narco fashion in Mexico. They traveled a lot to Miami. They passed through a lot of Caribbean places. For example, I don't know, Cuba, some of these islands in Central America, and they had all this inspiration from these souvenirs, shirts that has the islands and things like that. They also had a lot of inspiration in Greek and Roman architecture. So you can see in these buildings, maybe Honor hasn't seen them, but you can show them a picture. They built these houses with big Greek columns and fountains with statues that put up water out. They had wild animals, and they were thinking about the Romans and the Greeks and a lot of those stuffs. For example, they had bathrooms with seashells, like the birth of Venus, and they didn't have a clue of what they were doing, but they create something that standardizes narco fashion, and that is out of what the other people thought was good taste. And we now have a lot of consequences of that, and people says with a lot of disrespect that he's a new rich. He's a new rich, for the way they look and choose their clothes or their cars or the way they decorate their houses, because they relate that sense of taste to this bad money. So going back to your question, I think that they were also people with a lot of power, negative power. They were very scared people, but they could use these things. They could use jewels, they could use gold in their hands, in their feet, because that was a way of saying, I have money, I have power. No one can say to me, you can dress like that. And that is mainly because they have this eagerness to be seen, but they weren't. They in a point they tried to be their own taste rulers, taste makers.
That's super interesting. And what do you think of other, like, besides narco fashion, like other types of fashion that you can find maybe in Bogota or in general in Colombia, about men choosing to dress in a different way that is not the quote unquote norm?
I think we have gone a long way with prints specifically. Colombia is a very tropical country, and you can see that in the way people pick their prints. So I don't know, maybe 5 years, even 10 years ago, you couldn't find trunk short for beach with prints in pink or in purple, because that was out of the question. Men do not wear pink. But I think because of all you see in social media, in Pinterest, you are all the time watching styles from all around the world, and you can see that we past that point in which that was very like plain. Men only had like 3 choices of color: green, blue, maybe red or black. And you have now a lot of range of color for men, but also in prints, specifically tropical prints are now something genderless here. You can have maybe some election of flowers or birds of types of leaves that are more feminine. I think the color harmonies are very important to define what is feminine and what is not in terms of a tropical print. But I think men here are very comfortable wearing tropical prints. Maybe they are not as comfortable using other types of prints like only florals, or maybe, as I said, lace or something like very woman inspired, because I think this is a transition. I have a lot of brands that work with me that work with only men, and they have their product portfolio, the half of it is plain colors and half of it is prints, and prints have to be very, very careful. With women you can do whatever you want mainly, but with men we have to be very conscious about the size of the print, the type of bird of the print, the layout of the elements, because men do not like to be with, I don't know, maxi prints, and they are very picky about that. I think that we have a growing culture of men like taking care of themselves. Here was a boom of barbershops.
Oh yeah, there's a barber shop
In every corner.
Every corner.
And this wasn't a thing. I think 10 years ago you couldn't find a place specifically for men for
Even
grooming.
5 years ago.
No. And now you can see places specifically for men, for beards, for hair. And I think it's something that is well seen from the time, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago is well seen that you go to a place like that. But after that, you have to go to the same hairdresser a girl went.
Yeah.
So I think it is in constant evolution, and in the, as you said, the norm. I think that 80% of the population here dress by their norm. Talking about men, I don't think they're very experimental. They don't use a lot of different colors. I think, of course, there is a part of the population that is going forward, but it's not all of them.
That's a shame, though. But hopefully, it will. We'll start to see more change in that.
Yes. So then, from here, I want to ask you, like, as a designer, what is your perspective about feminism in the fashion industry?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think, loving fashion as I do, I think fashion is also this big monster that eats everything that is in front of it. I think feminism is very important from all perspectives, but in fashion, I think there are 2 types of brand. The brand that understand that feminism is like sustainability, that you have a lot of things to check, to review, to really have a feminist brand. Like, for example, do you pay the same to a man and a woman that perform the same job? I don't know. That's something that you have to ask yourself if you want to claim that you are a feminist brand. And there are other brands that use that movement or that struggle with only the aim to sell. I once was walking in front of this of Bershka, a fashion store, and there was like 3 teachers printed that said like, feminism is what is going to shape the world of tomorrow. And another one says, women are going to change the world. and all about them were about feminism. And that made me really sad, because I know for sure that that brand does not pay the people, does not pay well. Maybe they pay them, but very little. Does not pay well to these women that are mainly women, like in 90% of their fashion workers, and they claim to be feminist. And so I, in the other half of the world, I buy this t-shirt because I feel super empowered, and I think that's very sad. With a lot of these social movements and all of these claims, fashion is very superficial. And I think there are brands, of course there are brands, because I'm not going to say it is all of them, that review themselves and say, okay, I have to first work in all of these matters to say that I'm a feminist, to say that I'm sustainable. I think with time, people are going to be more inquisitive with the brands, are going to ask more questions, very uncomfortable questions, like who made my clothes, where they were made, and this was a fair trade with the people that did all the dirty job, and you're only profiting from this. And also it's going to be about the social movements, of course. You have now the power and the two-way communication. Now I can post in social media, I can't believe these people is doing this. You have to explain to me, why are you using this as a claim to a brand that obviously is not working with this beyond aesthetics? So I think that's what happened with feminism in fashion.
That's, yeah, I also agree with you. I think it's for marketing reasons. Sometimes I see some brands that claim, or that they put on shirt stuff, and I'm like, you're just marketing, you're just, baiting for this.
But this is something that has been happening forever. This is a machine, as I told you, that it's everything that is put in front of it. That happened with punk.
Yeah.
Vivian Westwood was this designer in a corner shop, building all these leather jackets and jean jackets with studs and everything, and then some enterprise people came in and told her, okay, we want to make you a very famous designer, and then she was in the wrong way. And that's the way all these movements die. It happens with everything. That's why I think if we are conscious consumers, we have to ask things, very uncomfortable things, and stop buying. If we don't stop buying but feel uncomfortable, we are not doing anything.
Yeah, totally agree.
That's the way I think we can protest.
Yeah. I've been protesting to some. I haven't bought anything from Zara or H&M in a while, because I'm like, no, you're not paying well to, like, this is a slavery, like, you should not do this.
I think it is a conversation that is very gray, because I have the chance to decide if I want to buy or not to a fast fashion brand that is very cheap. But if I had 5 children and I have to dress them all, I think I couldn't take that decision that easily, because my reality is above what I think is fair or not.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a privilege also, no?
It's a privilege.
That we have the chance to say, I don't want to buy that because that causes slavery in the other part of the world. And so I try not to judge that very hard, because I know that there are some realities that cannot afford to buy something conscious because it's expensive. But also I think that if you have the chance, you have to ask, you have to do the uncomfortable job to sit and write to the brand and say, I want to buy that, but I want to be sure that that is 100% recycled. I don't want to buy something that you said is sustainable or whatever, but when you come to facts, is clearly not.
Yeah, that's true. I will take that with me as well. I will try not to judge as much. But I mean, I judge me if I would do it. And also with this time that I came to Colombia, I try to buy local. So there are like many places here that you can find clothes that are made here in Colombia. So I try to do it. I also, here in Bogota, we have a really nice place. It's called Only. And I mean, it's clothes that it's I think it's really well made, and it's made here in Colombia. So I really try to buy most of my clothes from there. Or if I went, I also went to this other place and I was checking where is this from? It's like, oh, it's made in Colombia. Oh, okay. So then I was like, okay, I will give you a chance and buy from you. And it's also cheap, and it's not it's not that expensive.
It's a very traditional store here. It characterizes because it has a very good quality for low prices. It does not have anything about brands. I think that's why it's cheaper, because a brand, when you have to invest some money in marketing, you have to put that in the price point of the products.
That's true.
So they are not competing with brands. They are only talking about they're not talking about the product, and that's why they have stand so much in time, I think.
I this time I tried to go there and be like, I will support this.
And that's that's the easiest way to really understand where all this fashion comes from. If you buy local, you can ask the local designer, the local business owner. You can go directly to them. It's a lot harder to talk with the owner of Zara, right? So maybe if they can do this all these campaigns that we are a fair trade company and all of that, you also know that someone check up that message and said, yes, that's what I want to communicate about my brand, but maybe it's not even real, or maybe there is a percentage of truth that is this big. But with a local business, you can see that with your own eyes. You can see how are the conditions with the people that work in the store. You also support an economy that is closer to you, and you can see the results of that investment because the business grow, and you can see that. That also allows you to have deeper, meaningful conversation with the people that are making your clothes, and not only like go and I don't have any idea what chemicals were used, what types of yarn were used, what types of I don't know, shipping process was that. I don't have any clue of that. So I think it's important that local facilitates that type of conversation.
I agree. That's true. We're running a little bit out of time, but I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about your initiative with Gamer Girl Industries. Or wait, did you have any other question before?
No,
jumping?
Actually, it's very nice you are bringing this up.
Yeah, just tell us a little. You told us a little bit of this in the beginning, but just so like.
Well, this, as I told you before, is a project I've been thinking a lot about in the past. I myself, I am a gamer from a very early age. So is Nadia, and my partner is also a gamer. I've come to understand a lot of this business in this new era of information through my partner, and I find that this conversation is very male framed. And there was no dialogue with women, but the one that had the gamer that was very sexy again, and this for the gaze of men mainly. I think that I wanted to create this because I don't think that there is a community with quality content for girls that enjoy gaming. And they also have this they have to adapt themselves to the male conversation in in the other communities that I found. So for example, I think that there's a lot of women that enjoy aesthetics in videos, like the way they are designed, character design, environment design, sound design. I think men too, but because they have this problem with enjoying beauty, they do not talk about that in any review of video games. They do not talk about what it feels to meditate with a game, for example. That I think that are there is a very structured way to think about video games from this male perspective that are like, you have shooters, you have RPGs, you have action games, adventure games, puzzles. But I think that from the female perspective, you think about this is the group of games I play when I want to feel connected in a more spiritual way. And I think no one talks about that.
I have some games that
I have games that I play when I'm really stressed out and I don't want to have like a lot of dialogues, a lot of decisions, but to explore the environments. And there are a lot of game designers that are focusing on this, but because of the conversation is all about this technical things and maybe these structured things that I told you before, this is left off the table. And I think it's very interesting. I also think that there are going to be women that want to talk about these technical things and performance and everything. But I want to have a more sensitive way to approach video games, because of course there are ways to enter other worlds and connect our minds to ideas or these environments that someone creates for you to feel some way. And that's why I wanted to create this. I want to create a very emotional community, very feminine, that you see up front and you think about that. Oh, that's so kawaii. Like, I love that because I want to trigger that feeling about the video games that I think is left out in other communities. I also think I want to talk about games from a perspective that I, as a woman, can be a player. I can also be a programmer. I can also be a sound engineer. I can be the creative behind the environment or the design of the characters. Talk about fashion in these choices about the characters, why they were dressed like that. Why do you think they chose this garment for this character specifically? Why do you think in this for example in Valentine's Day, I did an activity with the community in which they voted if their relationships, their romantic relationships between the characters in the games were true, were only sex, they have really good attractions, they were only drama, they were in toxic relationships. And I involved also couples that were queer, bisexual, gay relationships. And I think that's something no one talks about, although the programmers create a relationship that were between two women, but you don't see a review about that. You see a lot of sexual content about that, but no one really create a conversation about that.
There is conversation, I think, but in a super small community,
exactly,
or like in forums, but maybe not as.
It's not mainstream.
Not as mainstream. That is true.
So I wanted to bring light to that.
Yeah, I don't have so much information about game industry, but then can we say For example, we have seen indie games that have been going out of this very, like, let's say, masculine, like this stereotypical idea about games, that they have been very famous. And I think by time and now indie games have much more higher chance to be visible and to dominate not the industry, but the game sector, let's say. Do you think this change or this indie games effect is changing the norms about the gaming industry in general, or is it just a small disturbance in the, how do you
No,
say?
I think they actually are changing the industry. They are putting out some things that are game changers to me. I started to search this kind of more meditative games because I found a game that gave me all this peace when I play. Journey that I said I'm wanting to play more of this, and I started to do the research, understand what the things the things that these people thought when they created the games, and all of them are from indie studios. I also think there is something about, again, the mainstream video game industry that has the AAA games that wants to standardize or create this box of what a good game should look like. And I think in indies, you have these explorations, again, of aesthetics, of colors, of shapes, of characters. You have a lot of female characters in the centers in indie games. In AAA, you have like 2 or 3. I also did that activity in the community, which are your favorite female characters in video games. And they were so little that were main characters. Of course they are, but main characters, very few. And that has a lot of impact in the community. I don't think there's a lot. Chun-Li from Street Fighter won the tournament of best female character, and I let the people vote as they wanted. But I also think that Chun-Li has no development as a character. And for example, there were characters like Ellie from The Last of Us or Major Shepard that you see that they have an active role in stories, and people did not vote for them. And that surprised me a lot, because you vote because you remember the character.
Definitely.
You remember what they did, what were their quests, their story. So I think we have a lot to do. I think if we talk about this from a more approachable way, in an environment that is safer for girls, because also they have a lot of bullying in other communities, because women are not the main target. I think
Republic.
I think because this is a male dominated industry, men think that women should not
occupy.
No, they think that we are bad players, that you can win a championship, that you don't have the guts to be the best player. They think you have to compete with other women, but they don't see you as a contender with men. And that happens with a lot of things. They think you play video games because, or your brother played video games, or your partner, your boyfriend, your husband, but not because that's your main interest. And I think that's something that we can change with gamer industries.
That's very good. That's very good. We will change that. I'm also a fan of that, because you're doing a great job in that community.
Thank you.
I think we're running out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today, and for sharing your knowledge, opinions, your everything. It was super good, because it was sort of like a history class of fashion industries, and but also sort of like super insightful in everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope it was clear.
It was
everything was clear. It was such a nice journey. I learned so many things. Thank you so much.
Thank
I also
you.
wanted Honor to meet you a long time ago. I always
Yeah.
talk about you with Honor. I'm like, you will be so good friends because she also likes drag. She also likes this thing.
We can be friends on her. I'm going to visit
Exactly.
Nadia.
She'll visit me,
Yes.
so you
Oh,
will have
amazing.
the time to meet.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I will see you soon then.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Thank you for inviting me.
So thank you everyone for listening to TechNet and to this episode. We really hope you like it, you enjoy, you learn about fashion, about gender as well, and how that can work in with clothes, and also about a gamer community that is growing. You can find us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and we have a website that is called technetcluster.com, and there you can find everything from us, or if you also want to find us on Facebook, where you can just type TechNet and there you can find us. There we have there our activities, updates, or if you just give us feedback, just go there and give us there. And nothing, just to tell you that TechNet is made by the research cluster TechNet, and we're part of the Gothenburg University. So then, see you next time. Bye bye.
See you.